Welcome back to the report. Now, as anti-Islamic protests become a regular occurrence, we take a look at the far right in Germany. Nathaniel Amos Sansom has been following this story.
The far right in post-war Germany has historically been contained on the political fringe, with laws prohibiting Nazi symbols in public areas. But after the first surge of the far right following reunification in the early 90s, there are growing concerns about another growth of the far right, on the back of anti-Islamic rhetoric. Here in Hanover last month, 2,000 football hooligans, who were part of the so-called Hooligans Against Salafists group, protested in the centre of the city. 2 peaceful counter-demonstrations were also held, attracting a crowd of more than 3,000 people.
Das Thema ist natürlich radikale Fußballfans, aber hat ja mit Fußball nichts mehr zu tun, ist ja eigentlich nur gegen Toleranz an sich. Und natürlich die einzige Option gegen Intoleranz, was zu machen, ist, wenn man das nicht toleriert.
While Salafism has been a target for far-right demonstrations, it makes up just a fraction of Germany's 4 million strong Muslim population. In recent years, Germany has pledged to resettle more than 28,000 refugees from Iraq and Syria, the largest number of all EU countries, all of which has provided a new scapegoat for the far right. Last Friday, arsonists attacked 2 buildings in Bavaria that were being converted into houses for asylum seekers. The buildings were said to be daubed with swastikas. Speaking to the media, Germany's president condemned the attacks, adding that there needed to be a more robust debate on asylum from around the EU.
Wir brauchen natürlich auch eine Debatte darüber, wie viele Menschen kann dieses Land aufnehmen und wie werden die Flüchtlinge, die nach Europa wollen, gerecht aufgeteilt in die verschiedenen europäischen Länder. Das heißt, es ist eine Menge Handlungsbedarf da, aber Ängste zu schüren oder gar Bewegungen zu entfachen, die so Europa oder unser Land zu einem Closed Shop machen, das kann nicht gut gehen. Das entspricht unseren europäischen Werten nicht.
Issues and debates centering around multiculturalism and integration have been part of German political discourse for decades, ever since the introduction of so-called guest workers from Turkey and the former Yugoslavia during the post-war economic boom. Recently, the regional parliament in Bavaria attempted to pass a much ridiculed law, which would notionally have required all immigrant families to speak German at home. Following her party's conference last week, the German Chancellor distanced herself from the failed bill, but stressed the need for immigrant children to know German in order to integrate properly.
Die CSU hat ja selbst gesagt, dass sie die Textformulierungen sich nochmal anschauen wird, also warten wir das mal ab. Ansonsten ist es ja selbstverständlich, dass das gute Sprechen der deutschen Sprache auch für die Integration ein ganz besonderer Punkt ist. Allerdings ist es auch kein Fehler, wenn Kinder zum Beispiel zweisprachig aufwachsen und eine Fremdsprache weniger lernen müssen. Ich halte das insgesamt für einen Vorteil, aber gute Deutschkenntnisse gehören zur Integration dazu. Dankeschön.
Following the carnage of the Second World War, German law and culture have shunned all expressions of extremism, with the German criminal code specifically forbidding symbols of Nazism to be shown in public. But whether this means that Germany has been able to keep the ideal balance between social cohesion and the rights of individuals to practice their own faith is another question altogether. Nathaniel Amos Sansom, The Report.
Well, with me to discuss this, we have anti-racism activist in Germany, Emine Aslan, and the journalist Anindya Bhattacharyya. Let me start with you, Emine Aslan. I mean, why is there sort of an increase in this Islamophobia and this hostility against Muslims in Germany at the moment?
I think it's not such an increase, actually. I think there is a development you could see around the last 3 years. For me, the media and the politics are responsible for it, because if you look into the German media and the German politics, Muslims are always portrayed as the others, as people or a collective group of people who are portrayed as naturally different from the rest of the German society. And if you have discourses like that, leading discourses like that in the politics and then the media, it's no surprise that people get a different point of view about some kind of people. So I think these demonstrations are just like the the worst part of increasing fear against Muslim people in Germany, also as asylum seekers. And I think like the far-right movement did a really good job in using the ISIS problematic in the Middle East to mobilize people against Muslims in Germany.
But I mean, Germany has a very long established Muslim community. That's the Turks, who've been there 30, 40, 50 years, some of them. I mean, is this prejudice that we're seeing now directed against them, or is it more against, you know, Arab Muslims who are now living in Germany, like the Syrian refugees, for example, that we saw in that video clip?
I think it started with the immigration workers and the first Turkish people who came to Germany. There were different kind of attacks back then into places where Turkish people used to live as well. But with the new discourse of immigration from Syria and Iraq and etc., there's a different point which has been added to the whole racist discourse. So one point leads to another, and it's a more increasing debate in the media going on right now. But I think most of the people don't actually distinguish between Turkish or Arab Muslims in Germany. They put all Muslims or Muslim-looking people as well together in one discourse. And I think that's also one of the problems.
Let me come on to you. Thank you. Let me come on to Anindya Bhattacharyya. I mean, you've been in Germany and you fought against racism in this country as well. I mean, what do you see as the origin of this problem now in Germany?
I think when Emine talks about the way that the established political parties have created a space for this, I think that's quite right. I think there's parallels with what's happened in this country. If a few years ago you saw the rise of the English Defence League, the EDL, and in a very similar way to the hooligans against Salafism in Germany now, you had essentially kind of fascist elements on the hooligan scene who spot that there is a space in mainstream respectable political discourse that they can occupy and build in. So a few years ago in Britain, it was off the back of a couple of Islamic terrorist incidents that they start to mobilize, and they say, oh, we're just peacefully protesting against extremism, but of course this is actually an excuse for traditional racist and fascist elements to come together.
Germany, unlike this country, unlike France, unlike Spain, has had almost no big terrorist incidents at all in the last 10 or 20 years.
Well, I'd say that underlines how this is always just an excuse that they use to hang on. I mean, at the moment, you've got a small influx of Iraqi and Syrian refugees into Germany. There's no actual serious terrorist threat of any sort, but that's all it needs for these groups to mobilise. And if you look at some of the ways they've organised, as you know, basically when the anti-Salafist hooligans group was setting up on their internet boards, they were explicitly talking about how they would use the media furore against ISIS and Salafists and what have you as a means of making their politics respectable. One of the hooligans is quoted as saying, my granny is going to love this, you know. And that's precisely the strategy the English Defence League used and tried to do 2-3 years ago. It's kind of the same ideology behind Anders Breivik's massacre. Across Europe, you're seeing the far right and the fascist movements essentially using the anti-immigrant discourse that you see from every major mainstream party, and using that and capitalising on Islamophobia, and using this as an attempt to start to rebuild their networks and start to rebuild organised racist violence on the ground, which is very, very worrying.
Well, I mean, let me come on to you with that point about the established big political parties. I mean, we saw Angela Merkel, and we also were told that Germany's taken more Syrian refugees than any other country in Europe. So surely the established political parties are doing quite a good job in trying to combat this Islamophobia and to be generous towards Arabs and refugees from Arab countries.
You know, when we look to the immigrant discourse in Germany, we also hear the politicians talking about useful immigrants and unuseful immigrants. So first of all, we have a problem of that discourse, you know, like they always talking about there are a lot of well-educated Syrians. It's good for us when they come into our country, but at the same time, they demand and claim that people should integrate, but by integrating, when you look closer to the politics, to the integration debates, it's mostly an assimilating. And at the same time, just short example, I think, which is really symbolic for me, there were like around, from year 2001 until 2014, there were like 141 attacks against mosques in Germany. And there was no serious statement from Angela Merkel. But when like 4 Muslim guys in some city in Germany, I forgot which one it was, dressed with jackets with the title Sharia police, and went to some teenagers and giving them some advice about not drinking alcohol and stuff like that. She thought it was a huge attack against democracy, and she felt to make a political statement against that. So I think, like, what's the discourse here? Why do you go and take a statement against some kind of this, like 4 teenagers doing some stuff, but not against attacks against the attacks on mosques in Germany, like, which is increasing and increasing, and those are symbolic messages sent to the Muslim community in Germany as well. So it's not only done by allowing people to come to your country, and I think that's an important point.
Well, what is the position about wearing the niqab in Germany? Is that legal, or are there attempts being made to ban it?
Right now it's legal, but the number of women wearing the niqab in Germany is really a small number. But there were debates lately to whether or not to ban the niqab. But yeah, I don't think like there are like serious political discussions about that. But some kind of parties always increase some discussions like that.
And to come back to you.
Right now it's legal.
Thank you. Coming back to you, Anindya. I mean, we saw on the clip how there was this huge march against the anti-Islamists. I mean, is there discussion or debate as to whether this is a good idea? I mean, it raises the profile of the whole event, gets more media attention. Is there not an argument sometimes for ignoring these fascist marches and just letting them peter out because they don't get much publicity and nobody takes any interest in them?
Well, the problem is, I think that, I mean, if it was just like 3 skinheads and a dog, then that argument might work, but they've clearly reached a critical mass where that isn't the case. I mean, when the EDL first started to mobilise, people were quite reluctant to demonstrate against them, and some of the counter-demonstrations were very small. And consequently, they just grew and grew and grew. And it was only when you started getting large numbers of people coming out to stop them, or coming out to oppose them, or doing anything really to stand up and be counted, saying, you know, these people coming to our town does not represent our town. That's the point at which, for starters, the people who are attracted to those hooligan marches start to become slightly less attracted. And also the authorities start to kind of reluctantly move into containing them. So I think it's very important to counter-demonstrate, and you know, the size of the Dresden anti-Islamist march was quite shocking. 10,000 is significantly larger than anything else we've seen like that in Germany. Interestingly, the group that organised that demonstration went out of their way to present themselves as moderate and claimed that they were just against Islamic extremism, etc., etc. Of course, the hooligans were there in the background. But the fact you have a counter-demonstration of similar size, I think, is tells you there is there's an anti-racist consciousness in Germany as well.
Well, I'd like to ask Emine that point. I mean, do you agree with that? I mean, that it is right to have counter-demonstrations and very important to do that?
Absolutely, absolutely. Like, I'm living in Wiesbaden, and there's a anti-Islamic rally established as well in Frankfurt. It's just 30 minutes away. And for me, it's really important to see that a lot of my friends, also political activists, try to mobilize people for a counter demonstration because it's a symbolic sign. if you live in Germany as a Muslim student, or I don't know, just any kind of Muslim person in Germany, and you see all this propaganda going on in the streets and in media and stuff like that, it is important for you to see that as well. There are German people in a society who don't think like that, who are seeing you as a part of their society. Without that, you would not feel welcome and not feel like participating in that society anymore.
Well, for example, in the Dresden demonstration, I mean, were most of the people there Muslims, or were they mostly non-Muslims who were just expressing solidarity with the Muslims?
I'm not sure, actually. I think they were mainly non-Muslims, but because they were like mainly from the left side left side political views. And yeah, if you look on the population, like we have like 5% Muslim population in Germany, so I think it's really normal that you have more non-Muslims in such a counter demonstration as Muslims. But I think it's important to increase the awareness between the Muslims as well, among the Muslims as well in Germany, to join the counter demonstrations.
All right, well, on that note, we'll have to end. Thank you very much, Emine Aslan. Thank you, Anindya Bhattacharyya. We're moving on now. Much attention has been paid